Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ according to Matthew, for the 30th Sunday of Ordinary Time. When the Pharisees heard that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together, and one of them, a scholar of the law, tested him by asking, "Teacher, which commandment in the law is the greatest?" Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and the first commandment. The second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. The whole law and the prophets depend on these two commandments." The Gospel of the Lord. In her book, Bird by Bird, Some Instructions on Writing and Life, Anne Lamott retells what she describes as, quote, "the best true story on giving I know." An 8-year-old boy had a younger sister who was dying of leukemia. His parents explained to him that she needed a blood transfusion and that his blood was probably compatible. They asked if they could test his blood. "Sure," he said. The results showed that his blood would be a good match. Then they asked the boy if he would give his sister a pint of blood, that it could be her only chance at living. He asked if he could think about it overnight. The next day, he went to his parents and said that he was willing to donate his blood to his sister. So they took him to the hospital, where he was put on a gurney beside his sister. Both of them were hooked up on IVs. A nurse withdrew a pint of blood from the boy, which was then put into his sister's IV. The boy lay on his gurney, quietly watching his blood drip into his sister. The doctor came over to see how he was doing. The boy opened his eyes and asked, "How soon until I start to die?" Every word of the gospel comes down to love. Love that is simple enough to articulate, but so demanding that we shy away from it. The mystery of God's love is that God should love creation so completely and so selflessly. And all God seeks in return is that such love be shared by all God's people. The brother, believing that giving his blood would mean he would die, nonetheless is willing to give his life to his sister so that she might live. In his generosity, he models the great love and compassion of our God. In today's gospel, as in the gospel readings of the last few Sundays, the Jewish leaders seek to trip Jesus up. The question the lawyer poses was much discussed in rabbinical circles. Which one of the 613 commandments in the Jewish law, the Torah, is the greatest? The Pharisees' intention in posing the question was to force Jesus into a single rabbinical school, thereby opening him up to criticism from all other sides. Jesus' answer, however, proves his fidelity to both the Jewish tradition and to a spirituality that transcends the legal interpretations of the Torah. The second commandment is the manifestation of the first. If we truly love God with our whole being, that love will manifest itself in our feeding of the hungry, our sheltering of the homeless, our liberating of the oppressed. To love your neighbor as yourself is not confined to our own people or to a list of specific situations, but should affect every relationship we have and every decision we make. Because every one of us at one time or another is an alien, an outsider, a foreigner, a stranger. As a class project in sociology, a group of college students were touring the slums of a city. As they walked along, they saw a little girl playing in the dirt and garbage. One student instinctively reacted to the sight. God, why doesn't her mother clean her up? Her professor replied to the student, that girl's mother probably loves her, but she doesn't hate dirt. You hate dirt, but you don't love the child enough to go down there and clean her up. Until hate for the dirt and love for the child are in the same person, that little girl is likely to remain as she is. As the professor challenges the student, God challenges us to love others completely and totally, to seek what is good and right for those we love, regardless of the cost, the inconvenience, the consequences to us. To love enough to both hate the dirt that hurts another and love that person enough to go down into the dirt and clean them up. As our society becomes more and more diverse, as science continues to make once unimaginable advances in all forms of technology, the ethical and moral questions we face become more complicated, difficult, and challenging. The Great Commandment gives us the starting point for dealing with such issues, to love as God loves us, without limit, without condition, without counting the cost, completely and selflessly. In our e-connected existence, the words of Jesus in today's gospel are especially challenging. To love with our whole heart and soul and mind require us to unplug and be present to one another, to engage one another as our loving God is engaged with us, to seek not just images and perceptions of compassion, but actually see compassion and experience love in one another. But genuine love is not a synonym for like, nor is it a feeling like anger or affection or lust, which we share with other animals. Genuine love is an act of the will, a commitment that takes over when the feelings fail, when the beloved is, at least at the moment, no longer even likable. Parents show real love when they discipline their children. The child's face says, I hate you. And inside, the parent is saying, right now, I'm not too keen on you either, but I love you enough to bear your hating me so you won't get into trouble like this again. As a friend put it, love is the desire and the decision to stay connected to others and to the world around us. Love is the glue of that connection. Something similar happens when we consider love of God. We often confuse love of God with soft emotional feelings, which are translated into sentimental prayers and religious practices. But it doesn't matter whether or not you grow misty-eyed at the thought of your Maker. The goal is to love God, not to feel mushy. The heart, to the ancients, was the seat of life and also the center of reason, not emotion. To commit your heart to God was to hand over both life and consciousness, to direct every purpose and decision to the glory of God. Heart, soul, mind, and strength, as Jesus identifies them in the Great Commandment, are not four different areas of jurisdiction to be surrendered. Rather, think of them as 4 nails being driven into one place to emphatically fasten down our intentions to love. While on a tour of California's giant sequoia trees, the guide pointed out that the sequoia tree has roots just barely below the surface. Someone exclaimed, "That's impossible. I'm a country boy, and I know that if the roots don't grow deep into the earth, strong winds will blow the trees over." The guide replied, "Not sequoia trees. They grow only in groves, and their roots intertwine under the surface of the earth. So when the strong winds come, they hold each other up." That's kind of like people, what we're supposed to do for one another. That is, when we love one another. Thanks for listening.